talk a lot about a book. I don't know if you've run into this one, but it's by Mansur Olson, who's sort of a founder of public interest economics, and it's called The Rise and Decline of Nations. This is a very famous book. Libertarians love this book, and I love this book. It's not right about everything, but its fundamental question is: how come after World War II did the completely destroyed, bombed out countries of Germany and Japan, you would have thought they would be just screwed? And instead, they both become growth miracles. They both do much better than the UK, which, was on the winning side of the war. Why? And Olson's argument is that affluent, stable societies over long periods of time develop something that is very difficult to develop and very important to develop, which is bargaining organizations, right? Collective action is hard. It is hard to form an organization. It is hard to make that organization persist. But if you can do that in an atmosphere of stability, then over time, that organization will tend to entrench its power, right? Think about AARP or the Chamber of Commerce or certain unions or, the National Manufacturing Council, et cetera, the Business Roundtable. They're not that powerful when they start, but over long periods of time, they become really powerful and they start to pass laws that make themselves more powerful and so on. There's a lot you can say about this insight, but my favorite part of Olson's book, and one that I don't think people emphasize enough, is this insight he has, which is that over time, every country has a kind of form of natural selection within it. And that form of natural selection will select for people with the skills to best navigate the kind of economy that country has. So if you're in China right now, and China's in its developmentalism phase, you really want to be in civil infrastructure. Right? It is great to be a civil engineer in China, great to be working on semiconductors in China, great to be doing all this stuff in the physical world. But America, as a kind of price of our affluence and our success, we've become a country, and this happens to a lot of countries, where negotiation is really important. And a country in which negotiation is really important is going to, over time, start developing a preference for lots of lawyers, people in finance, management consultants, because it is a society that requires continuous, what he calls complex bargaining. And I think this actually explains a lot. Patrick Collison, we quote him who's the CEO of Stripe, brilliant tech guy. Here's his point that he made in an interview with Noah Smith, who's a blogger and economist, where they were talking about high-speed rail. And sort of Patrick makes this point. He's like, it's just tough to be a high-speed rail engineer in America. You're going to have a much easier time working in the digital space. And so the digital space becomes a kind of frontier of last resort. And so people want to build things, go into bits and bytes, not into atoms, right? To use the old kind of Peter Thiel cut. And I think there's something to that. It's not that lawyers are bad. Some of the people I love most in this world are lawyers, and many lawyers do amazing, amazing work. But one reason we've selected for so many lawyers, and America has a lot of lawyers, is we became a society that needs a lot of lawyers because we are a society that is stable, affluent, and we've become very into bargaining. Donald Trump is a real estate developer. That's a relational business. The way real estate development works in this country, the reason you don't have all that many huge firms building housing in many, many states simultaneously is it requires a lot of relationships in the individual city you're in. And so, if you read, say, Maggie Haberman's great biography of Donald Trump, Confidence Man, which focuses a lot on his time as a real estate magnate in New York, you see, Donald Trump doesn't build a ton of stuff in other states. He actually builds in other countries sometimes, or more to the point, he puts his name on things built in other countries. But really what he did was build here. And he built here through his relationships with the New York political system. And so over time, societies that make building and construction and creation something that is the output of negotiations rather than very clear standards and rules where if you've done it, you can just do it. You get a lot of lawyers, you get a lot of management consultants, you get a lot of finance people because that's what society is selecting for. That's what you've made it possible to have agency and freedom in. That's what you need to do to do big things. This is coming from Nick Bagley, who's a University of Michigan law professor, but between Walter Mondale and Tim Walz, there's not a single person on a Democratic presidential ticket who didn't go to law school, not one. The Democratic Party in particular is a party of lawyers. And lawyers look at things through the legal perspective. And the legal perspective is that government is legitimate by following process. And Bagley's point is that government attains legitimacy, at least in part, through outcomes. And when you prize process so high over outcomes, you think you're acting legitimately, but actually it would have made you legitimate in the view of the people Is it you built the thing you told them you were going to build? You made it possible to live affordably in the city. And so you have this sort of movement then over time to populist strongmen who say, I alone can fix it, because they've kind of given up on this procedural liberalism. Like, that didn't deliver for them. So you keep telling them, we're the ones who know how to run government, and they don't see it. And eventually somebody else comes and says, I'm going to bust through the walls of this thing like the Kool-Aid man. And they win.